Welcome, everyone. All right, let's jump right into this. Today's explainer is really a masterclass in storytelling, and it's all hidden inside this profound little book called Stories of Sheer Pure Grace by Nancy Nelson.
Now, if you're a leader, a manager, or honestly just someone who has lived a really full life, chances are you've heard this exact mandate. You should write a book. John Pearson, the reviewer who originally brought this incredible book to our attention, says he's told colleagues this hundreds of times after hearing them drop some brilliant leadership nugget or a poignant personal story. And maybe you have your own brilliant insights, but you hesitate, just like Nancy Nelson initially did. You stare at that terrifying blank page, you get that familiar wave of imposter syndrome, and you think, why should I be the one to write this? Who really cares about my experiences anyway? It's so easy to just let our best insights fade away simply because we don't think they're worth documenting.
Well, Nancy actually found her answer in a really brief but super powerful conversation with the renowned artist and author Makoto Fujimura. Notice how Fujimura completely reframes the entire act of writing here. He told her, "These stories are a sacred trust from God. They are not to be kept to yourself, but have been given to you to be shared." And wow, that was the profound spiritual motivation that finally pushed Nancy to start typing. Think about how that completely shifts the focus. Viewing your experiences as a sacred trust means writing your story isn't about boasting. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. It's not about building up your ego at all. It's the responsible stewardship of the unique experiences, the hard-earned wisdom, and the grace you've been given. You're literally just passing on what was entrusted to you. And the results of that massive mindset shift? 50. Nancy didn't just, jot down a couple of quick anecdotes for her grandkids. When she opened herself up to this process, heaven came down and emboldened her to share 50 distinct, remarkable stories of insight and grace. Think about the magnitude of that for a second. Most of us struggle to remember one or two decent stories when put on the spot. But when you finally realize your experiences are actually meant to be shared, it unlocks this sheer volume of memories that you might have otherwise kept locked away forever. Section 1. The creative process, how to build your narrative. So how did she actually pull this off? How do you go from a blank screen to 50 polished stories? Let's get into the practical application. We're going to look at Nancy's method not just as a recap of what she did, but as a literal blueprint for your own creative process. Here's her exact formula. Step 1, sheer, unadulterated discipline. She sat at her keyboard every single morning for 2 months straight. Imagine that level of commitment, waking up and choosing the blank page over and over again. Step 2, a spiritual focus. She prayed daily, explicitly asking, "Holy Spirit, wordsmith through me these stories." And step 3, the structural framework. She didn't just dump a massive stream of consciousness onto the page. She deliberately anchored her stories. Let's look a little closer at that framing, because honestly, this is where the writing magic really happens. So the absolutely crucial point here is exactly how she organized the book. Nancy headlined every single one of those 50 stories with a unique characteristic of God. We're talking intriguing, catchy titles like The Master Planner, The Hijacker, The Stage Director, The Dog Catcher. Think about the last corporate history or personal memoir you tried to get through. Did it put you to sleep? Yeah, that's usually because chronological order can get really boring really fast. Just reading, in 1995 we did this, and then in 1965 we did this. It lacks a hook. But anchoring your stories to specific themes or characteristics, that helps you logically structure complex narratives and instantly gives your reader a compelling reason to keep turning the page. But that thematic structure was only part of the equation. Just look at the sheer repetition of community prayer we're talking about here. John Pearson noted in his review that he actually felt like a spiritual midget reading this because of how deeply prayer was woven into her entire creative process. Nancy prays, her friends pray, her coworkers, the board, her kids, her grandkids. This absolutely wasn't some solo, locked-in-a-cabin endeavor. Writing your story, especially when it involves the lives of others or organizational history or heavy leadership challenges, it requires a deep, supportive community. You need people in your corner helping you accurately remember and process that shared history. And you also have to remember that this whole process takes time. In the book, Nancy quotes Dutch Sheets, who presents this brilliant metaphorical contrast. He says, "We humans are into microwaving and God is into marinating." When you're writing your story, you might really want to rush it. You want that immediate microwave result where you just hit publish and you're done with the whole shebang. But think about the difference in flavor. A microwaved meal is completely different from something that has been deeply marinated over a long time. The best narratives, the ones with real depth, nuance, and vulnerable insights, they require marinating.
You have to sit with your memories. You really have to let them soak.
Section 2, Masterclass Example, the Tijuana Project.
Okay, let's see how all this builds into an actual page-turning narrative. We're going to look at one specific masterclass example straight from the book, The Tijuana Project. This is the ultimate example of turning what could be a super dry, mundane event into a captivating story. Here's the raw data, the basic academic premise. Nancy was completing her master's degree in dietetics and nutrition at UCLA, and she conducted a research project with expectant mothers in Tijuana, Mexico. Now, on its face, that sounds exactly like a standard line on a resume, right? It's factual, it's highly academic, but it doesn't exactly scream page-turner. And it is so incredibly easy to leave our best life experiences trapped in boring academic or corporate jargon just like that.
But remember her structural blueprint? This brilliantly illustrates that method in action. She didn't just write a dry academic report. Instead, she deliberately framed the narrative by casting God as the stage director. Boom! Suddenly, this mundane nutrition study isn't just about spreadsheets and data collection anymore. It's an active, unfolding story about how circumstances were being perfectly orchestrated behind the scenes. She infused what was literally a master's thesis project with incredible spiritual drama, serendipity, and suspense, showing exactly how the pieces of her research came together against all odds. And then she brilliantly ends it with strategic humor. John Pearson points out that you will genuinely laugh out loud reading the response of her esteemed UCLA faculty committee when they found out where Nancy's hard-fought research had ultimately been published, the Mexican Journal of Nutrition. You can just imagine the looks on those stuffy academic faces. She took a dense academic reality, applied her overarching thematic framework, added that much-needed marination time, and created a story with heart, humor, and a genuinely fantastic punchline.
Section 3, Start Writing Your Story. So we've seen Nancy's process, we've seen her structure, her examples. Now I want to shift the focus directly back to you and that blank page waiting on your desk. It's time to start writing your story. But as you begin, I want you to hold on to this incredibly heavy-hitting quote. Nancy's book features an endorsement from the late Eugene Peterson, the guy who created the Message Bible paraphrase. Peterson wrote that as we read the biblical narratives, we find we are not being led to see God in our stories, but to see our stories in God's. Let that sink in for a second. That is a fundamental, paradigm-shifting reorientation. The goal isn't to take your life and try to artificially squeeze a little bit of spirituality into the margins. The goal is to fully realize that your life, your organization, your specific management challenges, they're already actively playing out within a much larger, grander narrative. And that profound realization brings us to a really powerful gut check warning. Peterson also wrote that we actually do violence to revelation when we use it just to provide color and spice to our otherwise bland lives. He called this boutique spirituality, using God merely as a decoration or some superficial enhancement. So as you write your leadership insights or your life story, please do not just sprinkle spiritual elements on top of the text like a cheap garnish. Your readers are going to see right through it. It feels inauthentic, it feels preachy, and honestly, it feels like a sales pitch. What readers actually want, and what Nancy Nelson delivered so beautifully, is genuine, radiant vulnerability. They want the truth of the marinating process, struggles and all.
Which leaves us with one final, provocative question. Should you write a book? Should you and your coworkers finally sit down and document your organization's history? Well, you've got the blueprint right in front of you now. You know exactly how to find the profound spiritual motivation, how to structure around compelling themes instead of just boring timelines, and how to turn dry facts into page-turning drama. The stories you hold are a secret trust. They were given to you for a reason. So how are you going to share them? I want you to think about that deeply as you stare down your next blank page. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy writing.